Hey guys, Johnny here with Horse Soldier Training and Consulting. Today I'm going to do a video over saddles. We're going to start getting into the horse stuff a little bit more. But today I've got 4 examples of saddles out here. I've got my heavy stock saddle, my working saddle. I've got my wife's pleasure saddle. And then I've got 2 cavalry saddles, a McClellan, US model McClellan, and a British Universal Pattern saddle. So all are great options, but your saddle selection is largely going to depend on you what you're doing. Stock saddles are a good safe bet, but the problem with stock saddles is they're heavy. This one weighs close to 40 pounds, and so that's really heavy for a saddle, especially if you're trying to go long distance for long duration. Uh, this pleasure saddle, it's a well-built, very solid saddle, and it weighs in upward of 20 pounds. This one, universal pattern cavalry saddle or UP saddle or trooper saddle. This one is used by basically every Commonwealth nation. You'll commonly see these on the trail today. These are fantastic saddles. They're super comfortable and super soft on the horse's back. These are great for riders that don't have a very good seat but can stay on a horse, just because of the way the saddle is made, and I'll go over that a little bit later. But it weighs in at 17 pounds. And then I think that one weighs in at 19 pounds. And then the McClellan, this particular McClellan is a modified 1859 that is built on it's a refurbished saddle that's built on like circa 1880s tree. It is an original McClellan tree, and it is super lightweight, super comfortable to me, and fits my horse very well. That saddle weighs in at 16 pounds. So you can see from your nearly 40-pound stock saddle to your 16-pound cavalry saddle that's over half that weight. When you're going long distance things, you really need to think about weight. But if you're just doing pleasure riding or working cattle or whatever, heavy stock saddles aren't going to be that big of a deal. But if you're going hundreds of miles through backcountry, heavy stock saddles can cripple a horse just as fast as an injury on the leg can. A bad back puts you afoot, and so having a good quality saddle is very important. All right, so let's talk about the stock saddle and the parts of the saddle. Most of these terms will be universal across all of the saddles. Or the pieces might be universal, but the terms can change depending on the type of saddle and the discipline of riding that you're doing. But here's some universal terms. The front of the saddle is called the pommel. On Western saddles, they're typically swelled unless you have an A-frame or a wade, which is a type of A-frame. And they're, as the name would dictate or would indicate, the pommel of the saddle is shaped like an A, hence the term A-frame. Those are fantastic for working, but most of those are really heavy saddles. The rear of the saddle is called the cantle. The back of the seat is called the cantle. And this can vary greatly, especially in stock saddles. Different types of seats have different names. They might slope back away, or they may come straight up. That's a personal preference thing. Roping saddles typically have a lower seat, lower back, so you can swing the leg over getting on and off very easy. All right. Obviously, on a working saddle, you've got a horn. Usually, for working saddles, you've got a horn wrap. Could be made out of rubber or leather, type of leather called muleskin, which obviously comes from mules. But anyways, that's so you can, when you wrap your rope around it or dally off, it does not damage the horn leather itself, and it actually gives something that the rope grabs onto. and to prevent the rope from slipping through. It's necessary if you're roping livestock of any sort. Horn wrap is absolutely necessary. Again, discipline depending. All right, so the strap on the front of the rigging. So your rigging is how the saddle attaches to the animal. Usually you have Western saddles, especially working stock saddles, you've got two straps on both sides. The front one where you use to actually hook, cinch up and tie on Western saddles, that's called a latigo. And then the rear straps, the other three straps are called a billet. So the one on the right side is called your offside billet, and then your the two at the rear are just named billets, rear billets. Okay, so then we're going to get into, I'm going to flip the saddle around. All right, so on the offside, so some terms that you're going to hear often, especially in the Western world, are onside and offside. So the left side of the saddle is called the onside. That's where you get on the horse. And the right side is the offside, because that's where ropers get off the horse. That's one place, one urban legend, I guess, of how that got its term. So I don't know how offside got its name, but onside got its name because, yes, this is where you would mount your the side that you would mount from. But what most people don't understand is the why behind the name. So it's called onside not because this is where you mount from, but specifically the reason why you mount from this side is because military cavalry riding, you would be wearing a sword on your left side. And so trying to mount on that side with a sword on your left side isn't going to happen. So you would mount on this side, and that got written into cavalry manuals, and the cavalry doctrine got written into dressage doctrine and taken into other doctrines across the world. But it all comes back, most horse riding stuff across the world all has its roots in military riding at some point in history. All right, anyways, back to the parts of the saddle. So on the off side of the saddle, again, you've got the offside billet and another rear billet. Okay, now you have these two straps that go underneath. In Western terminology, they are called the cinch and the rear cinch, or maybe it's the girth and the rear girth. And in military terminology, this is a girth strap, and this is the offside billet. And on most military saddles, you do not have a rear cinch or a rear girth. In military saddles, the latigo is called a girth strap, not a latigo. All right, breast collar. Breast collars are an absolute must if you're going up hills, or if you're pulling things. Or girth, a breast collar is an absolute requirement. Typically speaking, they have various means of attachment. Some of them go through the D on the rigging on both sides. Some saddles have little small attachments built into the saddle. These suck. I don't care what kind of saddle you've got. These little things suck. They rip out. This is a well-made saddle, but the D on this side for attaching the breast collar to is gone. It was gone before I got it. I didn't do it. But anyways, so I run my breast collar through the D. Some of them are made with the straps here are super long, and those are typically made to go through the gullet and around the pommel on both sides. And that is another term. The gullet is this opening, and it splits all the way down the saddle. It's really prominent and noticeable on the McClellan saddle. And when I bring that up, I'll show you that. Breast collars have have a hook on the bottom. Usually it's just a spring-loaded thing, or maybe it's an actual strap with a buckle. That's going to vary largely, and that's going to go to the one of these D's on the girth, and that's going to keep the girth from sliding rearward. And when you pull on something, or your saddle goes, or you're going up a hill and your saddle wants to go backward, that's going to pull on the girth and keep that thing forward where it needs to be. All right. On Western saddles, most Western saddles, you have these strings. They're called saddle strings. You might have a rope tie, which is just a long piece of leather that you wrap around your rope. Typically, they have a split in the end, and that's just for hooking over the horn once you have your rope all wrapped up. And so your rope will sit nice and tight right there. Stirrups and stirrup leathers. So the stirrup is the horseshoe-shaped piece of wood. Mine are wrapped in rawhide. Most of them are made out of wood. They can be made out of metal or plastic, but most of them are made out of wood. They're, like I said, this one's wrapped. These are wrapped in rawhide to protect it from the weather. But this is where you put your feet when you're riding. And then this piece of leather is called the stirrup leather. And yeah, that's about it. One thing that I'll get into when we're talking about saddling, but I want to kind of cover it right now, is this little strap right here. This is a wither strap. And what this does, it goes from one side of the breast collar to the other. And what this does is it keeps the breast collar up and off of the shoulders, because the shoulders, as they're moving, they roll right there. And if your breast collar right there on their chest, and if your breast collar is hanging too low, it creates friction points, and you can gull your horse up without doing anything other than having the breast collar in the wrong place. So that keeps the breast collar up off of the points of the shoulder, while still allowing the breast collar straps to go back to the D's where they're supposed to go, so that your saddle is being pulled by the rigging itself. All right, let's move on to the next saddle. All right, so now we have the McClellan set up here. This is as I said earlier, this is a 1859 McClellan built on a 1880s era tree. It is an original tree. It still has the U.S. Army Ordnance Department mark stamped on the stirrup hanger. And for it being 100 and some odd years old, it is 30 years old. It is a really well-built saddle and is still very solid. So again, most of the parts you have most of the same parts, but the location's a little different, and the names might be a little different. Okay, so again, at the front, you've got the pommel. At the rear, you've got the cantle. You have your rigging, and the rigging on a McClellan goes from one side all the way over to the other. They do the same thing on Western saddles, but it's a lot different underneath all that leather. What makes a McClellan so light is it is a minimalist saddle. It has very little extra leather on it that it doesn't need. That is a hardwood seat, whereas Western saddles, even most working saddles, will have some kind of cushioning on the seat. Not all, but most do. So you can't see them on the Western saddle, so I didn't talk about them, but all saddles have these, and these are very important when it comes to the placement of your saddle on your horse. You have these two long pieces right here. These are called the bars. These are the portions of the saddle that rest on the horse's back. On the Western saddles, they are covered with shearing, with sheep wool that adds a little bit of cushioning, but underneath that is the bars of the saddles themselves. I've got an old broken saddle around here somewhere. Anywho, but you have to pay very close attention to where these sit on your horse, because if they're too far back, you can be putting pressure on the kidneys. If you're too far forward, you're putting pressure on the shoulder blades. So you have to be very careful of where your saddle sits. And as I was mentioning earlier about the gullet being very prominent on a McClellan saddle, that's this open portion right here on the seat. So your butt sits right here, and this is all open right underneath you. So just like on the Western saddle, you've got a D that your in Western terminology, latigo, in military terminology, your girth strap hooks to, and then on the offside, you've got your again, same thing. You got a D on this side. You've got your offside billet, and then you've got a girth. This is a your girth strap for, or not girth strap. This is your girth, and McClellan girths are made out of linen. They are very soft and very good and very comfortable for the horse. The girth that I have on both of those Western saddles, well, for that Western saddle, it's not on there, but for my big Western saddle, my stock saddle, working stock saddle, is a neoprene girth, and when I go over the UP saddle, I'll show you that because I have the exact same one on there. All right, stirrup leathers and stirrups. Military stirrups can come in multiple variations. Typically speaking, the McClellan stirrup is going to look something like this, just wooden stirrup, and some of them will have a leather hood that wraps around that covers this whole portion of the thing, and that's to protect the foot from anything being jammed in there, namely weapons, lances, spears, and swords. But anything that can get caught in there. Western saddles, you can get the same things on Western saddles. They're called tapaderos. But typically on a military saddle, it's called a hooded stirrup, or shrouded. Then on the McClellan, you've got slots that go through the seat in 3 places and through the pommel on 1 place. And these are for your coat straps. There are 6 coat straps, and 1 goes through the pommel, and then you have brass loops on both sides that get screwed straight to it, and that's where the other 2 on the pommel go. So you have 6 coat straps, and that's for securing, as the name suggests, your coat, blanket roll, bed roll, and other things. You've got brass loops that hang off of both sides. Typically they're on the front too. These are very common to get ripped out on the front because where they screw into the tree is very thin. That brings up another term, tree. The whole saddle itself, the wooden part of the saddle is called the tree. So you have various parts. You got the pommel, cantle, and bars. All of those put together are called the tree. McClellan saddles, as I said, they're solid wood tree. They're typically wrapped in rawhide, but then they have a small brass bar or iron bar that goes strap that goes across the front and back of both sides, and that's just to give it extra strength, because these aren't made in one piece. They're made in multiple pieces and then attached together. The seat is a piece, the pommel is a piece, and each of the bars are a piece. McClellans are typically original McClellans. You can find them for really cheap on eBay. 1904 McClellans are everywhere on eBay, and usually they're less than $500. And they're great saddles if you have a horse that they can fit. 1904s were built specifically for the thoroughbred and or a thoroughbred type horse, and so they're thinner. So the bars sit a little closer together because they're made to match the withers of a thoroughbred horse. So they're a lot narrower in the seat. You put that on a wide backed quarter horse and you can soar them up. Modern built reproduction McClellans are built for quarter horses. So they have quarter horse bars. So the bar angle, and that's the angle of this right here, the bar angle is much wider. So this one, as I said, is an original but it is pre-1900, and so it's still made for more of the Morgan-built horse rather than the thoroughbred type horse. Just because of that in itself, it's able to fit my horse really, really well. And if you ride well and you've got a saddle that fits well, you don't need a tremendous amount of padding underneath. But if you ride poorly, you might want to think about supplementing that, even that well-fitted saddle for your poor riding with extra padding. More on pads later. All right, so one piece of equipment that a lot of reenactors swear by, and that's this extra piece right here. This is called a surcingle. A surcingle is just a strap. It's got a buckle on one end and a leather piece on the other, and then linen in the middle. And one thing that you really got to worry about with modern reproduction surcingles is they may be the correct length from end to end, but leather is a heck of a lot cheaper than linen, this particular linen. And so your linen will be too short and your leather will be too long, and you'll end up sitting on leather, or there'll be leather on your horse. Properly putting the surcingle on, neither you shouldn't be sitting on leather, and there shouldn't be leather on the belly of the horse. This goes around the belly of the horse and across the seat of the saddle. I'll show you how to put it on later. Reenactors, modern reenactors will swear this is serves as like an extra girth. I can tell you from experience, this don't do crap as an extra girth. It's not a safety strap. That's not what it was ever designed for. It was designed to ride, put your blanket on the horse, put this over it as a girth, and ride the blanket bareback. So effectively, you're riding bareback down to water and back up to the stables, where you would then saddle up regular and go to work. But instead of rolling this up and stuffing it in a saddlebag somewhere to take up space, you would just put it around the seat of the saddle and put it on there. Reenactors took that as something else and ran with it. There's a lot of photographic evidence of these being used as breast collars, because the breast collar for a McClellan saddle was not part of the original equipment when they were issued. They were issued with just basically what I just showed you: the saddle, the coat straps, and the stirrups, a blanket, and a surcingle. That was basically it. And then the individual soldier equipment like saddlebags and whatnot, and all the rest of the horse stuff. Breast collars came about once they left the east side of the country and started moving across the plains and getting into the mountains. Now you got a bunch of ups and downs, and saddles start sliding, and from there, we're like, oh, we actually might need something to go on this. Also, they start pulling heavy artillery, so you get the artillery saddle, which came with a breast collar, but artillery and cavalry are completely different things, and the saddles were different. Very similar, built on the same trees, but different. Sorry, I'm rambling. Breast collars weren't an issued thing. They were typically made by the saddler, and then later they became an issued thing much, much later. More photographic evidence of surcingles being used than the brass-hearted breast collars. All right, let's move on to the universal pattern. All right, so this is the universal pattern cavalry saddle. This is was the British cavalry saddle for many, many years. Late 1800s up to the dissolvement of the cavalry in the 1940s. So basically, you've got two bars, just like on the McClellan, and then you've got a iron bar that connects them on the front and the back, but the back one is kind of laid out like this, and that's so your bedroll and stuff can sit under there, and you got plenty of seat there, and it's very cushioned. This one is very deep. A lot of them sit very flat. This one sits a little too high for my liking in the back, but it is a very comfortable saddle to ride, and here's why. Underneath, the seat is made out of padded leather. So each one of these little stripes here is basically a quilted portion of seat. So that is stuffed with probably mohair or wool or something. And it is made to be very cushiony. And the seat does not ever touch the horse's back. Like on a McClellan, you're sitting straight on the bars. You're not on the universal pattern saddle. You're sitting on these linen webbing that's underneath. And basically you've got two pieces of webbing that make an X underneath, and then you've got two pieces of webbing that go over the top to keep that down and tight. And so it's called a suspended seat. So I can reach underneath through the seat and between the seat and the bars and touch my fingertips together, because the seat is a good 2 inches above the bars of the saddle. And so as you ride, as you bounce, that linen webbing underneath absorbs that bounce, and it does not transfer it as roughly or hard into the horse's back. The bars also have a little bit of flex to them, so they can fit a wider variety of horses. I have seen some experimental versions that are actually hinged, so they can actually turn quite a bit so that they can fit basically any horse you put it on, or mule that you put it on. I don't think they ever adopted those because of I don't think they lasted very, very well. I think they were kind of brittle. All right, so the other type of stirrup that you'll see on military saddles is basically just the iron stirrup. And it is just an iron loop that's flat on the bottom of it. And typically you won't see these on American saddles until post 1900, and usually only on the officer's saddles. And that's, one of the big differences in English riding and Western riding is the stirrup and the location and placement of the stirrup. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the saddle. Rigging on English style saddles. And so this is typically an English saddle. There's usually 3 small straps that hang off of the D on both sides, and your girth has 3 small buckles on it. That gives you very fine adjustments, and those are great and phenomenal. The problem is, here in rural eastern Montana, I don't have access to English equipment, or get out of here, or I don't have access to English riding equipment without special ordering it from overseas. So, or not overseas, sorry, from a bigger supplier. So I re-rigged this saddle to take Western rigging because that's what I have. And so now, since I'm talking about that, I'm going to talk about this girth. So this is what's called an Airflex girth, and it is a synthetic material on the bottom, or the whole thing is synthetic. But each one of these little things is a nice cushion part, but it has these deep grooves in between each of the little padded portions, and that allows, when it bends around the horse, that allows a little bit of airflow to get through there, and it also prevents bunching up that you see sometimes in certain girths. It might bunch the hair up. This kind of prevents that. It's not great. You still have to pay attention, but it does a lot better job. And this one typically goes on my wife's saddle, but here it is on this saddle. just like on the McClellan, you've got a lot of the same hookups for breast collars and other things that you might hang off of it. This one has D's built in for the breast collar, and I would use these because these are actually mounted with an iron strap that is screwed down heavy into the bars. And so you don't really have to worry about those ripping out. And then on the back, you've got two buckles, or two D-rings on both sides. D-rings, O-rings on both sides for hanging canteens or whatever off of. And on the back, on the bottom side of the seat, you have this long rectangular thing and two solid footman loops here. These are for your coat straps. This is where your coat sits. And so you would have three straps back here, or maybe, I think this is with the high back, I think this is an officer's version. So you would put a valise here. So basically just a small round packet that holds whatever officers put in stuff, maps. But that's basically it. It's a great saddle. I will say of all of the saddles that I own, this one is the most difficult to ride just because of this, how it sits, how elevated off of the horse's back you are, and how high the rear of the saddle is, this cantle is. I like riding this saddle, but I've been unhorsed a lot of times off of this saddle just for my horse being him. I don't think I've ever been unhorsed off of my McClellan, and my Western only when I'm breaking colts. But this one I've been unhorsed on a few times doing normal things just because of how high you sit. Your center of gravity is really high, and once you start adding chest rigs and belts and weapons and stuff, it really changes the dynamic of everything. All right, so those are just some good examples of saddles, of different types of saddles. All right, so let's talk about saddle pads real quick. So your saddle pad, again, is largely going to depend, like your saddle, is largely going to depend on your horse and the type of saddle that you're riding. You have Western cut saddle pads, which are typically rectangular, big and rectangular. And then you have English cut saddle pads, which are usually smaller and shaped so there's not a lot of pads sticking out. Whatever saddle type you're riding is going to vary on the saddle pad that you choose. Material, thickness, synthetic or natural, a lot of that stuff is going to be personal preference. But I've got a wide variety of stuff here, so we will get into that. So the first one I want to talk about is just a simple quilted type pad. And so basically you've got a saddle blanket that is open on one, that was open on one end, that they stuffed with a type of hair, or it could be mohair, it could be wool or whatever, and then it's sewn in various places around it. This one is sewn in like a increasingly smaller circle, and what that does is it keeps everything in place and keeps the padding from bunching in areas. These are fine. These are typically fairly cheap, but the problem with these is the longer you ride them, the more packed down they get, and they get fairly thin, fairly useless. They also absorb sweat, and they get heavy when they get wet, and they take a long time to dry. That's going to be a common feature. And if you're planning on doing multi-day trail trips, like, you know, long rides, or I'm going through the Bob Marshall or whatever, that's things that you want to consider, is how long is it going to take your equipment to dry. This one, I rode this one for many a years, probably far longer than the pad should have been ridden, and it's thoroughly worn out. As you can see, it's ripped open in the front. I mean, when I got it, it was a good pad. It is no longer a good pad. All right, so the next one I want to talk about is this one, and this is kind of along the same lines as the underside of a Western saddle. It's got the sheep shearing underneath, and that's basically what this is. This is a synthetic shearing, though. It is kind of like wool, and then on the outside of it, it's got a heavier, it's not a Cordura, but it's kind of like a Cordura. It's a heavier canvas-like material, but I don't think that's what it is. And like the quilted pad, it is sewn in circles around it. Most pads you see will have they will have guards in places. So on this one, you've got a guard on both sides here, and this is where the rigging goes, and across the front. And this is twofold. This is to indicate the front of the pad, and it is also to protect the pad from anything that might sit over the top of it. But a good pad, good and thick. This is my mule pad that I use. I use on him because it is so thick, and it is nice and soft. But anyways, there's that. All right, so the next type of pads I'm going to talk about are the pressed wool pads. And these can be super thin, like this one, or they can be fairly thick, like this one. And they can be super cheap, like this one, or they can be super expensive, like this one. So this one is, I got this one to experiment with under my McClellan saddle. Did not like it. But so this one is virtually brand new, even though I've had it for probably 5 years. It just rarely ever gets used because I don't have any need for it. But anyways, it's just wool that is turned into a felt and then getting really thick and then cut into squares or rectangles and made into saddle pads, stitched at the edge to keep it from coming unbound. But that is basically it. If you don't know how felt is made, they take fur fibers and they basically get it wet and they just press it together and press, and then there's something like changing directions and how you are pushing it together and stuff. There's cool videos on making wool or wool felt on YouTube, so you can watch that. I'm not going to try to reinvent the wheel with that. Anyways, felt press pads. And so this one is my working saddle pad. The pad that I wear under, that my horse wears underneath, is my stock saddle. This one is great. It is super thick, a lot of padding. But as you use them, they will begin to take the shape of the animal that you are riding. And so you can, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but it's indented here and here, and then it swells out here. And that's from where the saddle sits on the withers and where the rigging goes down onto underneath him. But these are absolutely phenomenal pads. They're great. They do a wide variety of things. Typically, the thicker the pad, the more likely it's going to be split so that it folds nice and easy. You fold these inside out when they're wet so they dry easy, which is awesome. I love that feature. And then this one has leather sewn across that split to prevent it from coming apart. And then this one has the wither notch and the wither guard across the top and the leather on the side. These aren't cheap. I think I paid like, close to $200 for this one. I think I saw one the other day, and I don't know if it had the gel inserts sewn into it, but I saw one the other day that looked a lot like this one for $240 at the Murdoch's Ranch store. So they're not cheap, but they're great pads. All right, so now we're going to get into the synthetics. And the first one I want to talk about is the English cut pad. I bought this one to run underneath my McClellan, and this one is phenomenal. Um, it is just a synthetic material underneath that's nice and soft, that's non-abrasive, that it works great underneath the saddle or up against the horse. And then on the outside, it has these rubber gel portions here. Well, everywhere the saddle sits is a gel portion. If you put your hand underneath like that and you press really hard, you can't feel you can feel pressure, but you can't feel like, oh, that's my finger pressing against me. These are phenomenal for distributing the weight of like military cut saddles or English cut saddles. These are absolutely phenomenal. Probably the best pads out there. And again, not cheap. This one was like $175. All right, so the next one, and this is the one I run most of the time when I'm on the trail, and the reason I do that is because of how fast it's going to dry. This is a neoprene pad. It has wool felt on the outside, but on the inside it is neoprene, and very, very good at distributing the pressure and the weight. This one is notched for your girth straps. It is also it's not cut, it's not split all the way through, but it's got holes. And that's for twofold. Neoprene is a very good insulator, but it's not breathable. So this allows a little bit of air to circulate onto the horse's back, allows some of that heat to escape. But what I like about these pads is how fast they dry. And as I said, if you're considering doing long distance trail stuff, pack trips or whatever you want to do, where you're living out of your saddle for a bit, you need to think about how fast your equipment's going to dry when you pull it off of the horse, because you can cause problems by putting wet equipment on your horse. So you got to be careful. All right, synthetic neoprene pad. All right, so probably the most expensive pad I have here, and this one is a Synergy pad, and it is a combination of the pressed wool and the gel pads. So this one has the gel pads right here on both sides. Very expensive. This is a very good pad, and it's a very expensive pad. This one was $250-ish, I think. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I bought this one. But this is my wife's pad that she uses. But its ability to distribute the weight is sorry, my Rottweiler puppy is playing with my colt. Anyways, its ability to distribute weight is phenomenal. Its ability to how good it absorbs the impact pressure and everything. It's like I said, this is the most expensive pad I have. It's probably the best pad I have. But it's got a downfall too, and that's because it's pressed wool. It takes a little bit longer to dry. Not as long as the solid wool pads, but it does take a little bit longer to dry. But still a great choice if you're getting into this and you're buying your equipment. And, you know, it's got the blanket sewn into the outside. It's got the same type of material like the Navajo rug type blankets. Man, they're great. I can't speak good enough about these pads. All right, so blankets. Most saddle blankets are unnecessary anymore. Now they're just for looks. Your saddle blanket was your saddle pad. Now you've basically just got a Navajo rug. They do serve a purpose, but most of that is not when you're on the horse. It's most of the time when you're off the horse. You can use this to dry him. You can use this as a ground sheet to lay on, to sleep on. They're great. They're, like I said, they're just the Navajo rug type blankets. You can use any type of blanket you want. Well, I won't say any type, but this is a U.S. Army wool blanket. If I unfolded it, it's, you know, the 5 feet by 6 feet or whatever it is. These are great freaking blankets for making into saddle pads. You fold them in half, then you fold them in half again, and then you fold them in half again and put it on the horse. And what I like about these is you can use it as a blanket when you're done, when the day is over. There's a wide variety of blankets out there. This is just 2 examples. Do your research and figure out what's going to work for you. So as you notice, I've got a lot of gear, a lot of different types of gear, and a lot of that comes from experience. And you know what they say about experience? Experience comes from poor judgment. So as with most stuff, do research. I'm not telling you to take my word for it. I'm not an expert in any manner whatsoever, but I've done a lot of this stuff for a long time. I've been teaching it for a long time. I've been teaching military horsemanship for 15 years now, 16 years now. Shoot, longer than that. Since 2008. Panzer! Panzer! Come here! You're gonna get kicked in the face, dude. No, come here. Good boy. Good boy. All right. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. If you liked the video, give me a like, subscribe. Comment below if you think there's anything I missed, left out. Spark some discussions down there, guys.